It's an interesting and difficult question. But for those of us who keep African cichlids in the aquarium hobby, is it ethical that we do so? Well, I recently had a viewer comment on one of my videos saying that it's definitely not. So, let's talk about it. Here we go. So a few weeks ago, I get a comment on one of my videos from a guy who's actually been swimming in Lake Malawi in Africa, and he says that these fish actually need to be in a lake, and it's a shame what I'm doing keeping them in such a small glass box with all their aggression, and there's no room to go anywhere when someone gets attacked. They're aggressive fish. They need to be in an actual lake. He says it's unethical what I'm doing. So when I get a comment like this, I don't completely disregard it, because first of all, I respect the person and their opinions regardless of whether or not I agree with them, especially since they took the time to leave a comment on my video. But also, second, I can't say I completely disagree with them. So let me ask you, when you get someone saying something like this, how do you respond to it? As African cichlid keepers, and actually really aggressive American cichlids as well, if this applies to you, is what we're doing unethical? Keeping them in a small glass box, and no matter what size aquarium you have, it's still a small glass box compared to Lake Malawi. I really want to know what you think, and I'm going to give you some ideas that have been running through my head since actually before this guy's comment, but especially after, because once you see it in writing, it really sticks with you a little bit. So stick around to the end, because I'm going to give you some ideas that may be a little bit surprising as to why African cichlids might be even better off in our aquariums than Lake Malawi.
What?
And then leave a comment letting me know what you think.
Here are my peacocks and haps, the inmates of Alcatraz, my 240-gallon African cichlid tank. I felt pretty good to have a tank this large, and that these fish get to swim around so freely in it. I mean, 240 gallons is a pretty big aquarium in my book, but Lake Malawi, where most of these fish originate, has a surface area of 29,000 square kilometers, or about 18,000 square miles. Incredibly huge.
That's what she said.
Obviously, no aquarium can ever come close to matching this. My large aquarium has a surface area of 16 feet. Not so incredibly huge now, is it? But how is life inside my tank compared to life inside Lake Malawi? If you don't think too deeply about it, then the knee-jerk response is just to say that it's much better in a huge lake, right? So let's find out if this is true. Let's compare life in Lake Malawi to life lived in a well-maintained, properly sized tank like Alcatraz.
I have 3 FX6 filters on Alcatraz, and I do water changes once a week. I have very healthy water, and because of this, my African cichlids very rarely get any kind of illnesses at all. But occasionally a thought will be popping into my head, and I'll think, man, maybe these fish would be better in Lake Malawi where they have all that room. But you know what? I did some research on Lake Malawi, and it isn't all rainbows and unicorns over there. They have a problem right now in Lake Malawi with these little plastic bags like you get at grocery stores that are just getting tossed into the lake. And then the African cichlids are coming up and taking little bites out of them and eating them. Man, that can't be good for them. And according to Taylor and Francis online, it isn't just plastic bags that are polluting the water. Because of tourism, a lot of restaurants and other businesses have opened up, and they're responsible for dumping other things besides plastic bags into the lake, including garbage, and you know what? This is gross, and even human waste. It's also been reported that local residents have even been in the lake taking baths and defecating in the lake as well. And I don't know if the fish are being affected by this or not, but it doesn't look good. But I can tell you that in Alcatraz, you won't find any plastic bags floating around, and I can tell you for sure that no human has ever defecated in my tank. And I'll bet you no human has ever defecated in your tank either, and that's why
You will subscribe. Ding ding.
Something else you might hear is that these fish are used to having all that open room like they had in Lake Malawi. They could swim wherever they wanted with almost endless space. And now they must be miserable being confined to such a small space. However, what they don't know is that none of my fish have ever even seen Lake Malawi, let alone been swimming in it. Most of my boys are actually from the eastern United States, so I guess that really makes them American cichlids, doesn't it? You can actually buy fish that have been captured directly from Lake Malawi. These have the designation of F1, so if you ever see that, then you'll know you have a native. I don't buy F1s for that reason. Now I know that in order to start off breeding these fish, breeders had to originally get stock directly from the lake, and sometimes they still do. And that does bother me a bit. Does that bother you at all? And even though it sounds like the conditions in Lake Malawi are less than perfect these days, I just prefer to have my fish tank raised so that they never know the difference between being in a tank and being in a big lake. And they seem happy. I mean, you can tell when a fish isn't happy. They just sit in one spot, color down, they don't eat well, etc. And that doesn't describe any of my boys. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, and I'm sure that's the case here.
Hit the like button, please. Another reason people think it's unethical to keep African cichlids is because of their violent disposition. And as African cichlid keepers, we know that they can be a bit on the nasty side. And they can get beat up or even killed when we're not watching. You can go to bed and everything's fine and wake up and one's been harassed all night long. And honestly, this is the one thing that gets me the most. It's just in their nature to be aggressive. And so when we confine them to a small area, it just exacerbates their violent nature. And it's probably the number one reason why African cichlid keepers end up leaving the hobby altogether. But it's not like every tank has aggression going on in it all the time. I mean, like my tank Alcatraz right now, it hardly has any aggression at all. But I know that there has been, and there will be again. It's just inevitable. So are we despicable cretins for keeping these fish in a small aquarium where they can't get away from each other? And we can sure, take the fish that's been beaten up, as long as he's not dead, and put him in a hospital tank, and then treat him and help him to get better. But it doesn't change the fact that he was tortured while under our care. And it could have happened for hours on end, especially if it was at night while we're sleeping. There's really just no easy way to think about this one. It's hard to argue against the fact that in Lake Malawi, there's probably a lot less violence going on against the fish because they can just swim away. But it happens in the aquarium hobby all the time. This is the one question that I'd like to hear most about from you, letting me know how you feel about that. While it's true that the fish in Lake Malawi obviously have some benefits over the fish in our aquariums, I think it's safe to say that there are some valid reasons why the aquarium hobby is also good for African cichlids. I mean, we can give our fish things that the fish in Lake Malawi just don't have access to.
How about good health insurance? I don't know how much it costs in Lake Malawi, but it's free for my fish, and they have instant, constant access to the doctor, which is me. I mean, I'm not a real doctor, of course, but I'm loaded with meds in case any of my fish come down with something that needs treatment. Who even needs a doctor anymore? I mean, we can just go on Google and find out what's wrong with our fish or us, and maybe we can just treat it ourselves, right? Google's our doctor now. Seriously though, if I notice a fish has an injury or illness, I'll assess the situation and decide if it needs treatment. If it does, I can either treat the entire tank if necessary, or hopefully I'll be able to just move the affected parties to a hospital tank and treat them there. Back in the lake, guess who's there to treat their illnesses? That's a big fat nobody. You're on your own, dudes.
And here's another one for you. Guess which fish in Alcatraz is gonna get eaten?
That's again gonna be nobody. I think fish all have that instinct to be careful and avoid becoming someone's dinner, so my guys must have some kind of feeling that they're in a pretty safe zone, at least from predators. In Alcatraz, I never put fish in small enough to be eaten by other inmates, so no one has to worry about getting gobbled up by another fish. Even though it's probably instinct for them to go deeper if they see a shadow fall on them from above, I don't think my fish ever have to worry about a bird swooping in and snatching them up either.
What a relief.
If you're a fish living in the lake, you better sleep with one eye open, because you never know who's coming to get you. It could be another fish, or maybe a bird, or even a fisherman. I hear that people in the area love to dine on fish from the lake. I mean, it doesn't seem like these fish would be that tasty, but okay. I can honestly tell you that there's no one selling fishing licenses that'll give you access to what I have in my house either. No big fish coming to eat you, no birds swooping down from the heavens either, and no guys with fishing poles trying to make you their dinner. So good fish keepers, I think that's definitely a point in our favor.
African cichlids are always looking for food. They're very hungry creatures. And in Lake Malawi, there's no guarantee that there will be food readily available for them. And if there is, it may be in the form of those plastic bags we were talking about.
But in Alcatraz, you know what's guaranteed? A twice daily feeding of some tasty northfin pellets with a blend of raw cichlid food lovingly marinated in a garlic garden Vitachem sauce. Those are two of the healthiest cichlid pellets you can buy, by the way. And they also get a weekly treat of some kind of krill and blanched zucchini. My fish eat like kings. I even hand feed Gary, and I'm also hand feeding my roadie now as well. They all know their food's coming when the light automatically turns on at 5:30 every day and I open that refrigerator door. I mean, right when it opens. They're watching from across the room and they know. They don't have to do a damn thing. They just sit there and wait for the silver spoon to drop in manna from heaven. They're not eating live mbuna fry like they would get in the lake, which I'm sure would be just fantastic. but they're still getting some delicious and healthy food straight from my fridge. I can tell you that they're more than happy about that.
So let me ask you now, is what we're doing in the aquarium hobby with African cichlids an evil thing, like that viewer said? And I think you probably agree that the worst part that might convince someone that this is unethical is their aggression, especially the aggression they show when they're kept in a small confined area and there's nowhere to escape. Alcatraz is big enough to where these fish can actually swim around and not get tracked down by one fish as often as they can in some smaller tanks. And I know people do put bigger African cichlids in smaller tanks, and that's just wrong no matter how you look at it. You gotta get the right size tank for your fish. And there are some things that we do for our African cichlids that actually make life better for them than the life they have in Lake Malawi. But do these positives outweigh the negatives? I think they do. But let me know in the comments what you think. Remember to hit the like button. God bless, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.